we are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry.
What if, in a single announcement, your entire industry was taxed out of existence? Imagine factories freezing, assembly lines grinding to a halt, and global supply chains. What if, in a single announcement, your entire industry was taxed out of existence? Imagine factories freezing, assembly lines grinding to a halt, and global supply chains collapsing, not because of a shortage or strike, but because of a political decision thousands of miles away. That's exactly what happened when sweeping tariffs under President Trump sent shockwaves through the global economy. But what followed wasn't just panic, it was a pivot. In this video, we're diving into 7 countries that ditched the US and turned to Canada in a desperate but strategic move to save billions in exports. What began as a trade war turned into a worldwide reshuffling of alliances and industries. Let's start at number 7, Germany, from Detroit to Toronto. Picture the sound of stamping machines echoing through a bustling auto factory in Munich. Engineers inspect transmission modules. Workers prep containers for shipment. But in January 2025, those shipments destined for Detroit suddenly stopped. A 25% US tariff on German-made vehicles and parts hit like a hammer. Suppliers like Summerch GmbH saw orders vanish overnight. Over 2,500 jobs hung in the balance, but Germany didn't fold. Instead, it pivoted fast. Just weeks later, Berlin and Ottawa inked a supplemental protocol allowing $10 billion annually in tariff-free German auto parts into Canada. Factories in Wolfsburg redirected 70% of production to Ontario. In Munich, engine blocks were loaded for Toronto, not Detroit. The line stayed running, and every single job was saved. Meanwhile, in Ontario, GM's Oshawa facility rehired 350 workers, while Hamilton's logistics hub expanded with 200 new hires. And Germany wasn't done. In March, a Paris-based wind turbine company, Intercon, signed a deal to export $1.1 billion worth of turbines to Canada. Quebec's renewable sector roared to life. What began as a crisis turned into a corridor of commerce. But Germany wasn't the only one rethinking alliances. Number 6, Denmark, wind blades over tariffs. On Denmark's windy western coast, factories were building the future, massive wind turbine blades stretching the length of a football field. Then in March 2025, the US imposed a 30% tariff on Danish green energy products. Contracts were canceled overnight. Rather than shut down, Denmark rerouted. By April 1st, a $1.5 billion green tech agreement with Canada was signed. Wind turbines and solar modules began flowing to Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan. Crews in Aalborg reprogrammed CNC machines to meet Canadian specs. Engineers flew to Halifax. And on Canadian soil, 375 new energy jobs were born within weeks. Halifax and Regina buzzed with installations, while Danish exports to Canada skyrocketed, up 65% in just one quarter. 900 Danish jobs saved. Over 1,100 created in Canada. A nation refused to stall, and in doing so it showed that clean energy is borderless. But the next pivot would electrify a different kind of market. Number 5, South Korea. EV batteries rewired inside South Korea's Ulsan gigafactories. Technicians tested battery modules bound for California until February 5, 2025. A sudden 20% tariff on South Korean energy storage tech cut the pipeline cold. Rather than face layoffs, LG Chem and Samsung SDI made a bold move. On March 20th, they signed a $1.7 billion deal with Northvolt Canada, rerouting 500,000 EV battery modules to Ontario. Just like that, Windsor and London's EV corridors roared to life. 700 plus Canadian technician jobs opened as Korean engineers began training local teams in high-precision module integration. Back in South Korea, 3,000 jobs were secured as factories adapted to Canadian packaging and labeling. Number 4, France. Fueling the future with hydrogen. In Lyon, technicians were building sleek green hydrogen electrolyzers, clean tech that turns water into fuel for emission-free transport. But by February 2025, a 30% U.S. tariff on clean energy tech severed the market. Instead of folding, France adapted. By April 3rd, a $1.2 billion clean energy accord was finalized with Canada. Electrolyzers worth $800 million were bound for Quebec and Ontario, powering a massive hydrogen infrastructure rollout. At the same time, a Paris turbine company invested $400 million into a Nova Scotia wind farm. By May, 250 French engineers had landed in Canada guiding installations. Canadian teams trained at workshops hosted by French experts joined them in building out the next-gen energy grid. 1,000 French jobs protected, 850 Canadian roles created. But even as factories hummed in Quebec, some welding stations in Lyon went silent. One French supplier laid off 150 workers after shifting contracts. This was no fairy tale. It was a complex shift with real consequences, but also real opportunity. Number 3, Australia. From red dust to revenue. Australia's vast outback mines were thriving until March 12th, when the U.S. slapped a 30% tariff on Australian minerals. Iron ore shipments stalled, lithium deals evaporated. But by April, the Northern Stars Initiative was born, a $3.5 billion trade partnership with Canada to reroute vital exports. Trains once bound for U.S. ports were redirected to British Columbia and Quebec. Vancouver and Thunder Bay ports ramped up, hiring 400 new dock workers. Australian managers scrambled to preserve jobs. 2,100 mining roles stayed intact as shipments adjusted. Hamilton steel mills in Ontario retooled to process Australian ore, increasing output by 18%. And Australia's lithium sector didn't miss a beat, launching a joint venture to send battery-grade lithium to Welland, Ontario, powering Canadian EV buses. Some smaller contractors still struggled. 1,200 workers faced temporary furloughs, but the core of the industry was saved. Number 2, Mexico, rebuilding through the North Walk through an auto parts plant in Ciudad Juarez in early 2025, and you'd feel it. Uncertainty. A 35% U.S. tariff on Mexican auto components cut off access to U.S. assembly lines, but Mexico didn't freeze. By February's end, Mexico and Canada launched the Triple North Corridor Alliance under USMCA, a bold plan to reroute $8.2 billion in parts through Ontario. ECUs, suspension systems, wiring harnesses, every shipment found new buyers. Ontario's factories expanded fast. 250 logistics hires came on board. Meanwhile, Mexican plants stabilized, avoiding layoffs by pivoting north. By May, Canada and Mexico had announced over $20 billion in new trade deals. From Baja to Brampton, a new era of cooperation was born. But one more pivot remained, perhaps the most dramatic of all. Number 1, Brazil, beef, soy, and ethanol reimagined. On the cattle ranches of Mato Grosso, the news hit like thunder. On March 1st, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on Brazilian beef, soy, and ethanol. Markets vanished, revenue dropped. Thousands of farms stood on the edge. Then Brazil acted. By March 28th, a $2 billion agreement with Canada rerouted the flow, $1.2 billion in beef, $600 million in soy, and $200 million in ethanol, bound for Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec. 150 Brazilian ranches began shipping directly to Toronto area slaughterhouses, saving 5,000 jobs. Soy producers accessed emergency financing to boost exports. In Canada, the response was immediate. 400 new hires at meat processing plants, 250 workers in Winnipeg and Saskatoon managing grain flow. This wasn't just trade, it was transformation. Where the US pulled back, Canada stepped in, and Brazil's farmers found not just relief, but new revenue. From German engine blocks rerouted to Ontario to Brazilian beef packed in Alberta, this wasn't just a trade story, it was a global reset. Trump's tariffs may have aimed to protect American industries, but they triggered a migration of billions in exports, thousands of jobs, and a major realignment in global supply chains. These 7 countries didn't just survive, they adapted, partnered, and pivoted. And in doing so, they've reshaped international commerce in real time. If this story surprised you, hit the like button, comment below which country's pivot shocked you most. And don't forget to subscribe, there's more to this story coming soon.